Hey, how you doing? I'm here at the Boxing Locker with Matt Goddard, and we're going to talk a little bit about boxing, but I'll let him introduce himself first.
Hello, I'm Matt Goddard from the Boxing Locker. I'm a former professional boxer, now a boxing coach. You can find me everywhere at the Boxing Locker on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all them bits. And yeah, let's crack on.
So we've been doing some filming. Check out his YouTube channel, by the way. There's some great stuff coming out soon. We were just kind of chatting a little bit about the difference between boxing and MMA, and there's a couple of things that I thought would be fun to talk about. And the first thing is, why is it that whenever people talk about boxing and MMA, there's this assumption that people in MMA aren't very good at striking?
I would say it stems from the lack of individual focus on one kind of discipline, you know. I guess from an outsider's perspective to MMA, it's not something that I follow hugely. I watch a bit, but you know, it's kind of there are certain people who are masters in specific disciplines, but I think the act of combining disciplines makes being exceptional in any one far more difficult. And I think you know, if you look at somebody in boxing like Canelo Alvarez now, who's an exceptional boxer, there isn't an MMA fighter in the sport that could get in a boxing ring with him and outbox him. I mean, people are talking about the Usman fight, but I mean, that's just a money grab. And I'm not against those kind of fights. I just think in individual disciplines, you know, guys are spending a lifetime perfecting one thing, whereas if you have to spend a lifetime trying to get better at lots of different things, it's far harder to kind of utilize them. And also something that we didn't talk about that I think is quite a big thing is the mentality of not knowing which discipline to apply when. So, you know, if in multiple disciplines they give you multiple ways of defending a jab, for example, so, you know, kickboxing, Muay Thai, any other standing sport, I don't know, karate, taekwondo, they would all defend the punch differently, and that the mindset of having to decide which of those is the appropriate defense to use at which time would interfere with your speed of thought process. That just wouldn't happen in boxing or in kickboxing, or if you'd only trained that one way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting, and it kind of leads me to think a little bit that is it that it isn't actually worse, it's just different, and that if you're going to throw a jab in a boxing ring, I'm going to defend it in a certain way because I'm boxing too.
Yeah.
But I can say if we're in an MMA competition, that you could throw a jab and I could counter that with a double leg takedown. So it may just be that the striking that I've got isn't worse, it's just more suited for an arena where there's more options.
And also less necessary. If you don't need to defend the jab because you can just take somebody down, then the jab in itself becomes less important. In a boxing ring, the jab is the most important punch. It controls distance, it controls space, it sets up combinations, it stops people coming forward. In MMA, it doesn't have that effect. That's why you don't get guys who just jab. You know, like in a boxing match, you can have a guy who, Floyd Mayweather, for example, has the most underrated body jab in the history of boxing, and it was a punch that maintained distance for him in every single fight you ever saw him in. And people kind of neglect that, but actually, if he'd gone into an MMA octagon and tried to do that, it just wouldn't work. Like, you couldn't control distance with a jab because you'd get teeped, or you'd get your leg kicked, or somebody would take you down, or someone would Superman punch over the top of it, or there's just options in MMA that make specific boxing things less possible. However, what I would say is a good boxing background will level up your MMA dramatically. Because if you can punch hard in any position, you're very dangerous. And if you look at guys that are great strikers, nearly all of them punch like boxers. They don't punch like how an MMA fighter, how a wrestler or how a Muay Thai fighter would punch. They punch like boxers punch because they're the best at punching. And then kickboxers are the best at kicking, and Muay Thai fighters are the best at clinches, and wrestlers are the best. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to change the subject a little bit, but still kind of boxing related. My focus with boxing is kind of historical pre-Marquis of Queensberry rules boxing. And are you seeing a change in the way people box now because bare knuckle is coming back into popularity? Or is it just that people are taking what is effectively modern glove boxing and applying it to an arena where there are no gloves?
I would say what I've seen of bare knuckle boxing and the bare knuckle boxers I've worked with and my own experience of punching bare knuckle, what I would say is that people are now applying the skill set of gloved boxing to the bare knuckle arena, and you're seeing a greater level of skill in what, when it started, was basically a couple of fat bald geezers smashing the granny out of each other.
Yeah.
When it restarted, I should say.
No, absolutely.
Was basically just a couple of old geezers who'd probably been in a bit of trouble in their life and wanted to make a quick couple of quid, smashing the granny out of each other in a field surrounded by haystacks.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing, you know, there's fighters coming through in bare knuckle boxing that have been GB boxers, that have been GB amateur superstars, and that skill set translated into the bare knuckle system is going to be devastating. Particularly when they just make those little tweaks that kind of make the punches a little bit more effective, that make the punches a little bit more damaging.
Well, and there's been quite a lot of debate on some of my recent videos about, say, horizontal versus vertical fist alignment. And in the olden styles, the pre-gloved eras, most straight punches at least were thrown with a vertical fist, not a horizontal fist, because whilst you're losing power, you gain in precision, so you're more likely to protect your hands and be able to carry on. Are we, do you think, likely to see that happening, or is it the fact that modern medicine's good enough now that if you break your knuckles they'll fix them and 6 weeks later you can be training again?
It's a difficult question, because from my perspective, though I box with a wrist rotation because it's how I was trained, I, from a coaching perspective, don't believe that there is any right or wrong. I believe the most important thing from a coaching perspective is to land with your big two knuckles. Outside of that, I don't really care how you land. Okay. So I personally will rotate the wrist over when I jab and cross. I don't always. Like if somebody has their hands up, I'll punch straight through the middle of it with a vertical fist. And there's guys like Gennady Golovkin who do that all the time, and who literally punch sideways fist all the time when they jab, and then he'll reverse the vertical by having thumb down when he comes over with the right hand, so he comes through to the sort of back of the ear with the big knuckles. I think what I would say is that all of those old things are starting to all of those original kind of methods are starting to have a resurgence, because not just people like yourself, but the old fights and the old training, you're starting to see more of it talked about, and that because historians and people like yourself have a platform now, that people who are interested in boxing are able to go back further and see more and go, they used to do it like this, why don't they do it like this now? And what I would say is, in the early years of gloved boxing, there was a lot more knockouts. People hit a lot harder, and I think that continued into the 70s and 80s, and then started to diminish. And I think that stems from an amateur background and the lack of focus on damaging people with your punches in amateur boxing, and the lack of focus on having planted feet. because the more on your toes you are, the less hard you can hit, and that's just a fact, because you don't have the same centre of gravity, you don't have the floor to drive off of. And if you watch boxing, now one of my favourite fights to watch is Hagler Hearns, and both of them spent 3 rounds throwing absolute haymakers, but they weren't wild and uncontrolled. They were beautifully delivered punches, and look how much flatter their feet are, how much more they're using the ground to throw their shots, how much more they're thinking about where they're hitting people and how they're hitting each other, rather than just landing. You know, I think the focus as boxing's progressed has got more into just landing shots, and that's where it's gone wrong.
Okay.
And I think that's where the old things coming back into it is a good thing.
Yeah, it's making it a little bit more purposeful.
Yeah, more purposeful. And it's just better to watch when people can hurt each other. We spoke about this earlier, you know. You don't want to watch a fight like Paulie Malignaggi had an unbelievable heart, incredibly brave man, but he couldn't break a twig with a cross. Like he literally, if a boxer can't stop a guy, he has to be exciting in other ways, and it's hard to be exciting in other ways in a fight if you can't ever hurt the other guy, because eventually they just go, oh, sod it, and then just start going to war with you. And then it's either a boring points win for you, or you get knocked out, and nobody wants to watch that.
Yeah.
Not through a whole career either, you know.
No, absolutely. I think that's fair. And interestingly, bit of a tangent. There was a very famous bare knuckle champion from the Broughton's Rules era, so before the London Prize Ring, called Tom Spring, who was probably the first disputed champion, but he was known as the light tapper, because he was fast, he was accurate, he had the cardio, but he never really took anyone out and finished them.
Which, who wants to be known as that as well?
Yeah,
that's the other
absolutely.
thing, you know. You end your career and you're known as a great skill set, but couldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah.
Like that's just not what any combat sport is about. You know?
It's not what you're going to boxing for, is it?
No, I mean you don't. As a kid, you don't go, do you know what I want to do? I want to be able to go 12 rounds and never hurt anyone.
I want to be the best boxer that can't punch.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
And also the thing with power is it's the equalising factor. If you have no power, then no one's afraid to fight you, because like, you know, I don't. If a guy keeps punching me in the face for 12 rounds but does absolutely no damage to me, I'll be there at the end of the 12. I might lose, but I'll be there at the 12 going, let's go again. Like I don't like.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And you don't want that. You don't want guys to go, I'll give it a go. I'm not fussed.
Yeah.
You want to be like, you know, like George Foreman did. No one could ever switch off for a second, or Michael Moorer, you're knocked out, you're asleep.
Yeah.
And Michael Moorer was an exceptional boxer, and then George Foreman literally put him to sleep. And you think that's why power is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to change the subject again. As a boxer who now YouTubes, what do you feel about YouTubers who now box?
Okay, so I've got kind of two opinions coming at it from different ways. If they're purporting themselves to be professional boxers, then I hate it.
Okay. Can I just stop it there, edit it there?
Just leave it. We'll leave it at that. From the perspective of putting on professional shows and promoting it as a professional event, not professional boxing, but as a professionally, you know, like on telly, all those kind of things.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with it. I think the more people that watch boxing, the better it is for the rest of boxing. And I don't have a problem with them trying to enter boxing. I don't have a problem with somebody like Jake Paul, for example, who, I mean, I say I don't have a problem with him. I think the way he's done it is a bit, I mean, it's a bit sly, a bit snidey, it's a bit of a con. But where I like it and where I'm behind it is that boxing grows and it keeps growing boxing with a market that otherwise wouldn't see it. I mean, there is no way on earth 11, 12, 13-year-old boys and girls are going to sit down and watch a boxing show with any of the current world champions unless they've already got a massive profile and social media following, because social media is what drives it now. And And Jake Paul is giving promotion to Amanda Serrano. Katie Taylor is a perfect example of this. That's a card that never would have gone ahead without Jake Paul backing Serrano. Like, it just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And his investment and his promotion of the event made that the biggest women's boxing fight in history. And that's a brilliant thing for boxing. The side of it where he's like, I'm going to keep being a professional boxer and box no professional boxers is the side of it that I hate. And I think is a cop-out. And I think he says, you know, most pro boxers start off boxing journeyman. That's exactly what I did. That's what 99% of pro fighters do. And it's completely fine. That's legitimate, and it's a good argument. But the difference is journeymen are exceptional boxers that learn to survive, that learn to punch, that learn if you're not good enough to beat you. Whereas former wrestlers that were terrible strikers when they were in the UFC don't know any of those things. They have no survival skills in boxing. So when a guy that's naturally a lot bigger than them starts pounding on them, they have no way to defend that, and they end up getting stopped or knocked out, and it looks terrible for the sport. And the talk of him fighting Tommy Fury and all of these kind of things, I mean, for me, that should have been the first fight. Like Tommy Fury is a nobody in the sense of what he's achieved in boxing. His last name is the only thing that has value. And that would have been a great fight to start Paul off. Paul wins, then you go, oh, fair play. He loses, you go, okay, he comes again. But, I mean, I just fed up with the whole, I'm a professional boxer bollocks. Sorry, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, that's fine. We don't mind a little bit of swearing every now and again. I'm gonna kind of wrap it up now, but if you've managed to make it this far in the video, seriously, go check out his channel. A lot of boxing tutorials coming out very soon, and some quite interesting predictions and some little ranty videos. We're going to do a few more collaborations over the next few months, so do check it out. Thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And I'll see you soon. Fight soon.